Hey everybody and welcome. It's Jim, it's Amadeus. It is Wednesday. And Amadeus, crazy things going on. Let's start with the NHL last night. The Capitals beat the Flyers 2-1 on an empty net goal with 4 minutes left to go in that game to enter the playoffs where they will begin their process of playing sometime this weekend against the New York uh, Rangers in Madison Square Garden. And there's probably some teams on the outside looking in, wondering what the heck happened there. And then we still have games, and most of them are meaningless now.
Yeah, it was a wacky day yesterday all around and really
Mm-hmm.
all the sports. But yeah, especially in the NHL, obviously the Capitals locked up that final wild card spot in the East. And honestly, it's a real shame because yesterday this Penguins game today kind of meant something. Now it means nothing because the spot's locked up, and it makes me wonder, what the NHL was thinking with the NBA. We saw the regular season end on Sunday with all the East teams at 1 and all the Western teams playing at 3:30. And we see it all the time in the Premier League. They do all the games at the same time. We see it in a lot of these other leagues. Every game is at the same time for the last game of the season because you don't want anybody throwing games or stuff. But here we are in the NHL. The Capitals have locked it up. The Penguins yesterday thought they were playing for something. They're not playing for anything today. And we still have another day tomorrow, meaningless game. So it's just, really, I scratch my head as to how the NHL does their schedule.
Well, and the game between the Flyers and the Capitals was interesting in so much as it really was one of those granular things where Philadelphia, to stay alive, had to win in regulation. So, a point for the Capitals would have been good enough to keep them alive and would have put Philly out. But we saw something that I don't think I've ever seen, and that was in a tie game in the in the third period with just 4 minutes left to go in regulation. They pulled the goalkeeper. They thought they cleared the puck. It bounced off the boards, and TJ Oshie picked it off, and basically, for all intents and purposes, could have skated in and put it in, but he, from about 20 feet away, just tapped it and went in because the keeper's not there.
Yeah, and honestly, it was just a terrible coaching mistake by John Tortorella. I totally understand the situation that you're in, and
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. Pull the goalie. You need to score
Right.
that goal. But to pull the goalie with 4 minutes left when you only need one goal, it's not like you were down by 2 or 3. I think that in itself is a ridiculous situation because we're a ridiculous decision. Sorry, because we talked about it a bit before the show about how you only need one goal. 2 minutes is enough time.
Mm-hmm. Especially in a 6-on-5.
Yeah, you put yourself in a situation. 4 minutes is hard to defend and keep
Right.
the other team out. 2 minutes, that's half the amount of time. And I totally agree with the decision to pull the goalie. You need to win in
Mm-hmm.
regulation, but to do it that early, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because, like I said, you didn't need to come back down 2 goals or something. You were tied. You needed to avoid regulation, but you still only need the one goal. And we saw the Red Wings, they tied the game with 3 seconds left. So there's no reason why you can't pull the goalie at the 2 minute mark and get that goal you need. That was
Well,
just,
actually, in the game with Detroit, they pulled the goalie with 90 seconds.
yeah, and that's a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, because again, they were down 3-2. The last thing they needed was a 4-2 two game, so they pulled the guy with 90 seconds left, and they ended up, as you said, 3 seconds away from oblivion, and they tied the game up. It ended up not to mean anything, but at that time, it put the pressure on Philadelphia.
Yeah, and 4 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, but you got to remember it's the end of the game after you just played
Right.
55 minutes. And even then, 4 minutes is a quarter of the period. So that's still, a decent chunk, 1/4 of the period you're playing without, plus all the stoppages and things like that. So Yeah, just a very interesting decision. Obviously, it failed, but yeah, it was a wild night in the NHL. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for the Capitals, it's the 16th playoff appearance in the last 18 years. So, the Capitals, in many ways, we talked yesterday about, the Braves and the Dodgers making the playoffs every year, but, not making anything happen. It's the Capitals making the playoffs for the 16th time in 18 years seems, and with one cup to call their own on this one, they now have. They face a New York team, which is the President's Cup winner. And, in the past, winning the President Cup has actually been, in some regards, kind of like the curse.
Oh, that's exactly spot on, Jim. That's exactly what I would call it, a curse. We saw Boston last year, they set records, best home record, most points.
Right.
They were the best regular season team ever. And who said they were going to get kicked out in the first round by the Florida Panthers? This guy. And what happened? Exactly that. And the Panthers ended up going to the finals. But it's one of those things where the President's Trophy, and if you saw the way Boston played to end the season, they were in contention to win that trophy. They were starting to pull away from Florida, and they started to fumble down the line. And I'll be honest with you, I think they were throwing games a bit because they didn't want to win that President's Trophy. It was something where
let the Panthers take it. Yeah.
That's what I mean, right? They probably were saying that, like, this team beat us last year when we were the winner. Screw it. If the Panthers want it, let them do it, because they lost as the President's Trophy winner years ago to Washington, I think it was, in the first round. So,
yeah.
So it happens almost every year.
Washington has won it 4 times. And after the third time they won it, they asked Bruce was coaching then. They asked him, what he thought of it. He goes, "I wish we hadn't have won it."
Yeah, it's literally a curse in the NHL. It's the weirdest thing. It's the equivalent of the supporter shield in the MLS, and you just it's like a curse lifting that trophy, man.
Yeah, it's like, don't give it to me. And the funny thing is, the year that the last year that the Capitals won that, and ironically, they played the Rangers in the second. It was the second round of the playoffs. In the 7th game at in Washington, 7th game of the series in Washington, the Capitals, in a tie game at 2-2, lost the game. I'm sorry. No, I apologize. The game was 2-1 Capitals. The Rangers tied the game with 1.1 second left in regulation and won it in overtime to win the 7th game.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, we see it all the time in sports, right? With superstitions, you got the playoff beards. We got guys won't touch the roses at the Rose Bowl. Usually the conference champions won't even lift the conference champion trophy because they want to win the Stanley Cup, right? It's same thing here. It's crazy, but it keeps panning out. You win the President's Trophy and you're destined for failure in the playoffs. I can't explain it to you, but it seems to be a curse. There's no other way I can describe it. That you hit it spot on there.
Well, and the Rangers, right? The Rangers haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1994. So, winning that just doesn't exactly, like you said, I mean, it's going to be crazy, but it's going to be fun. I mean, I will say personally, and again, this is my personal belief, but I don't think there's anything more exciting in sports than playoff hockey from the standpoint, especially when you get into overtime. I mean, it's just anything can happen. It can be bad. The ice can be bad. You can have that, that unlucky bounce off of somebody. You have a keeper, which that was the position you played. You can have pucks coming from directions you didn't even think could possibly happen.
Yeah, and it was funny, when the Panthers kicked out the Bruins last year, it was actually the keeper that was the difference, because Bobrovsky was failing under the pressure, and it wasn't until they gave Alex Leon a shot where they really started to come back in that series. So it's interesting. I will say that that's one thing the Rangers have going for them. Obviously, we know Igor Shesterkin is one of the best goaltenders in the league, but believe it or not, Jonathan Quick had the better goals against average this year. So it's interesting, you know, the ageless wonder, Jonathan Quick. But they have two solid keepers. So we'll see how that translates and maybe helps them break this President's Trophy curse.
Yeah, you know, and Jonathan Quick, you know, he was money in Los Angeles.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, he there had to be at least 10 games, if not more, that they won simply because of Jonathan Quick.
Oh, 100%. And he was our guy when Canada was winning, you know, gold medals in the Olympics and things like that. Crosby was in the you know, in his prime. It was guys like that. He was the one that took the reins really from I think when we had Brodeur when he retired, right? But yeah, Quick's been a solid goalie. Now, he hasn't been great. Obviously, he's been bounced around the league the last few years, but he seems to have been doing well in this backup role in New York. So I will say the Rangers definitely have the goaltending going for them in this series.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, from the Caps, from the trade deadline on, the Caps were the best team in the NHL in 1-goal games, because they don't score a lot. So they win a lot of 1-0, 2-1 games. So this they play very good defense, which is something that is not usually, you know, when you talk about the Caps, even over the 16 years that they've been in the playoffs, the first thing out of your mouth is not usually that the Caps have a good defense. Usually it's talking about the front line with Ovechkin and those guys. But I thought last night was kind of interesting because you got Ovechkin and TJ Oshie who scored the goals, and they're the two oldest guys on the team.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, right, that at least they've kind of adapted, right? Because that's what's happening. The offense is older now and not producing as much, but as good teams do, they found a way to lean on their defense, improve that, and now they can win those low scoring, you know, close games, which really, as you said, they haven't been able to do the last few years. So, and the Rangers, you know, they play that tight style. They have good defense, so it's going to be a very interesting series. I think maybe we might see a lot of unders in it.
Yeah, I would. I don't expect that. You know, the old Capitals, a 6-5 game would be, you know, somewhat the norm, but not this case. I think that we're going to see a lot of really good. And I think from, you know, when you're talking about the goals, the goalkeepers, I mean, we're going to see some very exciting, you know, saves and some really good keeping, because both teams have players who can shoot, but it's, you know, it's the backstops there that keep them out, keep the puck out.
Yeah, definitely. You know, Charlie Lindgren has actually been very good this year, so I expect, you know, good things from him in the playoffs. And like I said, they got the duo over there in New York. So 100% between the defense and the goaltending. I'm with you. We're going to see some low
Charlie's playing against his brother.
Yeah. So there you go. You should know exactly how to stop those shots.
Yeah, he shouldn't be surprised from his brother. That's for sure.
100%, right?
But the mom and dad may have a little trouble. Maybe mom wears the Caps jersey and dad wears the Rangers. We'll have to see how they parse that one out. It's like the Kelsey family in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that works out. Meanwhile, on the hard court, it's obviously the moment the Warriors lost, the first words out of half of the press that covers them is the dynasty dead. Well, what dynasty? They they haven't won the championship in a while. Yeah, they can make the playoffs every year, but, you know, is it a dynasty?
Yeah, I think the dynasty has been dead for a while now, and this was really the year they were supposed to drop off, and that's exactly what you saw. They still finished
Yeah.
10 games above 500, but a few years ago they wouldn't have been making the playoffs in 10th place in the West. So
Right.
absolutely, and there's no excuse for them. This is a team where yeah, they're a little older, but they have championship pedigree, just like the Lakers, and we saw the Lakers win last night. And they couldn't get the job done. Klay Thompson was the glaring story in that game and his awful performance. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about the Warriors. I mean, maybe it's a different game if Klay is not shooting bricks all night, but it is what it is. I think we're definitely seeing them on the downturn now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, they have relied so much on the backcourt and basically, the wing scoring whenever they had Durant. They need to get they don't even play the half court offense anymore. So I'm not sure if you shouldn't be in a situation where if one guy can't hit his threes, you're going down. And that's a position now that the Warriors have found themselves in. They have kind of, they've lived by that long shot and died by it. And last night, that was the end of how it worked for them. They couldn't get they couldn't hit the threes enough to stay in the game. And they had they're playing a Sacramento team. It's not bad, but they certainly aren't that great. And I don't think anybody has to worry about Sacramento going to the championship. So, they kind of bowed out in an ungraceful way. Meanwhile, the ageless Lakers seem to find a way to beat the Pelicans and move on.
Yeah, the Pelicans are a team they've seemed to own this year. They beat them in the semifinal of the in-season tournament there, so they've absolutely destroyed them. I mean, I was on the Lakers last night, so that was a nice win for sure. They were up by 20 at some point in that game, and they blew the lead. Zion went off, but obviously, Zion had to leave the game near the end there, and he's out for Friday, which might be a blessing in disguise for the Pelicans against the Kings. But yeah, going back to the Warriors though, like never mind the threes. Klay Thompson finished with 0 points. He couldn't shoot, and it's funny because when you see what Steve Kerr had to say about the game afterwards, he was talking about how we need the old Klay back. We need Klay back. Well, do you? He's been so bad this year, and he talked about how it's been hard to watch him struggle. Do you want him back? Because I believe he's free agents this season, and
yeah.
From what I hear, the Orlando Magic are looking for a shooter, and they're going to offer up a ton of money for this guy. But now I wonder how much the Magic are really going to go after him of seeing the way he played to end the season. And if you're the Warriors, do you want to re-sign this guy? It seems like the dynasty is dead. So I think there's a lot in the offseason for this Golden State franchise to they're going to have to take a step back and reevaluate themselves for sure.
Well, there's some good kids coming out of college that you could draft that could, backfill you from a standpoint of, it wouldn't take long to rebuild that team if they chose wisely in the draft and basically made some reasonably, we're not talking about blowing the bank, but made some reasonably good investments in some free agents. I don't think that they're that far away from being, I'm not saying that it's dynasty time, but I am saying they can continue to be a contender if they draft wisely and spend wisely in the offseason. And I agree with you. I don't think Klay's the guy that they need to keep. If Orlando wants to spend money on him, let them do it.
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you invest your money wisely, that makes sense. It doesn't make sense to waste it. And by the way, TNT did a great job last night on coverage of the NBA. And tonight, if you're interested in watching, which many of you I'm sure are, then you're going to want to watch ESPN. So there you go. So TNT and ESPN have it. Max streams it, and ESPN Plus streams it. So that's where you are. In Canada, it's TSN, right?
Yeah. They in Canada, it's pretty much like it's not a monopoly, but there's only two. It's TSN and Sportsnet. Sportsnet does all the hockey, baseball. TSN does everything else.
There you go. And the playoff hockey's not gonna start till the weekend, so you got some time to chill out on that one, no pun intended. So that's where we are there. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of headlines. Headline A being that we talked when it was happening about Bill Belichick and where might he go, and it seemed like for the longest period of time that Atlanta seemed to be a landing spot with Arthur Blank willing to just write a check for whatever it took to get Bill to be on on their sideline. We come to find out now that Bill was really never close to any deal. That he kind of at times priced himself out of the position, and at times during meetings was not necessarily willing to bend to fit what was necessary. So this might very well be the end of Belichick. Might be an analyst from this point forward and not be in the National Football League, which frankly wouldn't surprise me, and perhaps in a way might be what is best for him.
Yeah, definitely. Bit of a weird situation there. And we've talked a lot about how, he really wasn't that great of a coach when he didn't have Tom Brady. So maybe, this is his chance to end his career as a coach on somewhat of a high note. I mean,
Yeah.
you won all those Super Bowls, right? So at least don't do any more damage to your career. And yeah, it's one of those things where, like, how can you trust the guy at face value? He comes out and he's like, well, I mean, I'm willing to give up the GM stuff just to have a job somewhere coaching, and then you get into the interview room and you're not willing to give it up. So there's got to be a little give and take somewhere, but there was no compromise with him, and that's at the end of the day, nobody had to hire him, and that's what happened.
And I think I think that they are going to that from Bill's standpoint. I mean, he and Nick Saban are best buddies. They're both the same age. We saw Saban, get to the Final Four. He didn't win a championship, but he realized that the game now, with NIL and with the transfer portal and all that goes with all that, that game was not going to be the type of game that he wanted to be involved in. And so he stepped aside. And I don't think anybody would argue that Nick Saban, if not the best college football coach of all time, certainly is in the conversation. So he steps aside. That's why I thought, frankly, that Belichick might do it, because again, they're buddies. They're it would have been the kind of situation where they could have worked out together and spent some time and had some the good life, because they both don't need the money, and they both could go out with their dignity intact. Belichick didn't take that route, and now perhaps he'll decide that the best track to take is to be a broadcaster and not to be anyone involved in coaching teams anymore.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Sometimes, some guys know when to hang it up when it's time, yep, and others don't. And it's obvious, those 20 years with Tom Brady rubbed off on Bill too much, because he didn't know, he simply doesn't know when it's time to hang it up. Meanwhile, Nick Saban saw the writing on the wall. He talked to the kids. He realized, I'm going to lose my entire team to the portal here, and the ones I keep and bring in, they're going to unionize on me. So what the hell is the point of even saying?
Well, and he was basically the closer, right? They would his assistant coaches would go out, identify the talent, and then when they were pretty sure that the kid was going to commit, they'd bring in the boss, and he would speak to the parents and everybody to have a good time with Nick. What with the portal and all that's going on. I mean, you almost have to have, as a matter of fact, many teams do in college. You have to have a staff that literally pays no attention to what's going on the field at the time. They'll meet with the coaches, but the rest of the time, their job is to identify kids in the portal and to identify, um, you know, high school players, and in some cases, identify kids in the portal that you may want. You're sitting there going, okay, wait, if so and so gets into the portal, we want this kid. So they're literally watching players who are on teams who they think might, because of one reason or another, decide to move on. And if that's the case, then Alabama's going to go get them. Well, that was not anything that Nick Saban signed up for and didn't want to do it. So, that's Coach DeBoer's problem now and not Nick Saban's coach problem.
Yeah, and that's a great point to bring up, because I think that's the other key thing that's going on here too, right? Like as you said, Nick Saban was the closer. It used to be an honor if you were a kid, right? You get Saban came out to meet you face to face like that. That was huge. Now it means nothing. It doesn't matter who you are. They don't want to meet Saban. Okay, send your fourth assistant coach in line, as long as their wallet is fat and they got some money to offer me. I don't care who you send. Send the janitor to come talk to me, as long as the wallet's fat.
Well, I can give you one real quick story. The Gaffneys, there were three of them that played at the University of Florida. And, Mama Gaffney, and they were all from Jacksonville. Mama Gaffney would usher the coach into whatever coach from wherever school would come to talk to her about about one of her sons being playing for them. And she would have a special chair, and she would have them sit in that chair and talk to her. She'd sit on the couch, and they'd talk about what might happen. And at the end of the day, as I said, two kids were easily headed to Florida. Well, Charlie Pell was the coach at Florida, and he came and he sat down in the chair, and I'm sorry, he sat down in the chair, and he explained that to Mrs. Gaffney, and she said, "Well, we have another couple of coaches want to come by and talk to the kids." And he goes, "Well, I'll tell you what. After they come, you can call me, and we'll come back. I'll come back." And he felt that way because of the Gaffneys. He had one player on the team, and he wanted to have all three brothers eventually play. So, long story short, Alabama was interested. It was the final year that Bear Bryant was the head football coach at Alabama. He comes in, he sits down in the chair. Mrs. Gaffney has a long conversation with him. He's just, as charming as he can be, but it's up to the kid. And so Charlie Pell comes back, and he goes to sit down in the chair, and she says, "No, you can't sit in that chair." And you go, "Oh, okay." So he says, "Just out of curiosity, that's the chair I sat in last time. What's the deal?" She goes, "That chair was set in by Bear Bryant. No one sits in that chair from now on." And because his brothers went to Florida, he went to Florida. David Gaffney, the last one, went to Florida, but nobody sits in that chair because Bear Bryant sat in that chair. So there are people, when they step into the room, they sold mom and dad on it. It's now just getting the kid in. But that was that's how it goes. And that's what Saban. When Saban walks into a house, that your kid's good.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like I said, it was an honor to have them there in the presence. Now it's not like that. Now it's just like, what contract, what NAL deal, what do you got for me? What can you do for me?
It's funny because a couple of guys who I know are saying, could you imagine, in a Bear Bryant world, right, where a kid would sit there with four hats in front of him, and then pick up and put on the baseball cap of the team he wanted. And Bear Bryant deciding that was it. And, I said, well, I remember Steve Spurrier. And Spurrier's thing was, he was the worst recruiter from a standpoint of talking to the family, because they would say, well, coach, we've got Georgia, and we got Alabama, we got Tennessee, we got, 5 or 6 teams that want Joe to play on our team. And you go, well, that's okay. Joe don't want to be a Gator, doesn't want to win. That's okay with me. By the way, we own Tennessee. So, if and his great line was, the Citrus Bowl was the bowl that, you got to. The Sugar Bowl was the SEC title championship. Got the champion of the SEC went to the Sugar Bowl, and the second place team went to the Citrus Bowl. And Steve used to like to say that you can't spell citrus without without Tennessee. So he would constantly, just destroy and mention often that, by the way, we beat Peyton Manning every time that he's played us. So yeah, he wasn't one of those guys who, if you didn't want to play for him or if you wouldn't commit to him, he didn't care.
Yeah.
So there are coaches, and to an extent, that's kind of the way that the Coach Saban is. I mean, he sells you on Alabama. If you don't want to play for Alabama, that's all right, but he's not going to chase you down.
Yeah, but you know what? I kind of like that, because it's. I mean, Dan Hurley didn't say it in the same tone, but he kind of said something similar. You're a great player, but you're a player on best player on a team that didn't win anything, right? You need to come here and win something. He just said it in a more cocky way. It's like, okay, you want to go to Tennessee and lose? Go to Tennessee and lose. Go ahead, right? Or you come here and win. What do you want?
But you know what? I think Coach Hurley, that endears him to people, right? I mean, if you're a player,
100%.
you're like, you're so used to people just saying, falling all over themselves, saying what a great player you are. And Hurley's like, hey, you're, of course you're a good player. If I wouldn't be here if you weren't a good player. So, but if you want to be,
but you can be better. That's what it is,
exactly.
Right?
Or you could win a national championship on a college basketball team.
Exactly.
You haven't done that yet. You haven't done that you haven't won a championship in high school. So.
Yeah. Do you want to be a Tom Brady or a Dan Marino?
Exactly. And John Wooden used to drive people crazy because day one of John Wooden's, when John Wooden, would start practice, you didn't touch a basketball. The first thing you learned to do was put your socks and shoes on. And people said, and they're like, what? And his first practice every year was putting socks and shoes on. And everybody's like, it drove him crazy. And the concept from John was there's nothing too small. There's no detail too small that you don't have to master it.
I like it. You want to play here, you better learn to tie those shoes properly.
Tie the shoes right, put the damn socks on. Which would have been a problem for Pete Maravich, because I don't think Pete ever had a pair of socks that stayed up long enough to play, for him to play. Yeah. But anyway, God rest his soul. But there's that. Okay. Anyway, let's move on for one last thing, and it's kind of a weird thing, but it was a top of the sports story today, and that was the two players and this is how ridiculous the draft situation's gotten. The two wide receivers that the Bears have decided to focus on with the 9th pick in the draft. Brock Bowers, of course, superstar wide receiver, tight end, whatever you want to call him, from Georgia, and Ronnie Azuna. And it's like, okay, well, that's lovely. Good luck to all of them. But do we really have to know that these are the guys that the Bears are going to allow Caleb to miss often when he's throwing the ball, I guess. But got to start somewhere, I guess. But
yeah,
that's the weirdness of it all.
got
But
to get fancy with the picks. That's what they like to
yeah,
do, right? Who's got the next Sam Darnold?
Yeah. Who's I don't know. It's the draft has befuddled me for many years. So we will figure that one another day. Meanwhile, you don't seem to be befuddled, my friend. You're on a pretty good streak. Let's talk about what you got going on tonight, and perhaps even today, because it's still early. On your docket for what we have in the show box below, and that's your picks.
Yeah, make sure you check out my premium picks at bigal.com, pickadvisor.com, and theinsidersroom.com. The links are in the description below. Coming off a winning 5-4 day. Looking to extend that into today. I have some action on the pitch in Champions League that you can go check out. I cashed my only Champions League play yesterday, some plus money with Borussia Dortmund to beat Atletico Madrid. Actually beat them 4-2 and advanced without going to extra time. So good on them. Make sure you check out my action there. I also have a play up in Argentina for later tonight that you can grab. I swept the pitch again last night in Argentina, and I'm on a 5-0 run the last 2 days. It's the last day of the regular season for the Argentina Copa de la Liga Profesional before we go into the playoffs. So that'll be last day of the regular season today. That's exciting. And I also got a play on the pitch in Brazil. Not a great start to the Brazilian season. I lost last night, but we're looking to bounce back today. I got 2 plays actually in Brazil. It's a big card, so make sure you check that out. And you can also get my only play in the NBA for tonight. I did go 1-1 last night. I had the Lakers and the Warriors, but I'm on an 11-1 NBA run with my last 12 picks. So it's been very hot to end the NBA season. Make sure you check that out. And if you need some action on the diamond, I also have one play that starts at 3, so some afternoon action there with the MLB.
There you go. One last thing, and you brought it up before the show, and we talked about them yesterday. PSG. Give us a quick 30 seconds on what happened yesterday with PSG.
Yeah, so definitely, you asked me what I thought would be the most shocking dark horse to come back and make the Champions League finals. And I said PSG, and sure enough, PSG pulled off the impossible yesterday. They were down 3-2 going into Barcelona, and they won 4-1 to win on aggregate there in the regulation. Now, to be fair, Barcelona was winning 1-0 in that first 10 minutes. They got a red card in the 20th minute, and then PSG scored 4 goals after that. So might have been a little shenanigans to help PSG out there. We'll see how deep they go, but just, shout out to them. I said that would be the most shocking dark horse, and they pulled off the impossible in Spain yesterday, but we'll see what happens to them in the next round.
There you go. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day. We will be back tomorrow. It's Thursday, and we'll be taking a look at quite a few things, including maybe a little bit of golf, and we'll get ready for tennis because very soon the French Open comes. So all that fun tomorrow, everybody. Have a wonderful day. And for Amadeus, I'm Jim. Take care.